What advice did you follow that everyone thought was stupid? My grandmother gave me a piece of advice that everyone said was stupid. She told me, if you ever find something people are throwing away, ask yourself why rich people are secretly buying it. At the time, I thought that was the most random advice I'd ever heard. I was 23, fresh out of college, and had just landed my first real corporate job. For the first time in my life, I was making decent money. My friends immediately started upgrading everything. New apartments, designer handbags, luxury vacations. One girl I worked with spent nearly 3 months of salary on a watch. Meanwhile, I was still driving a beat-up Honda with one working speaker. One weekend, my grandmother took me to an estate sale. Most people there were elderly collectors. I felt completely out of place. The entire house looked like a pile of junk. Dusty furniture, old paintings, boxes full of weird antiques. Then my grandmother pointed toward a wooden desk sitting in the corner. Nobody was looking at it. Nobody wanted it. The auctioneer couldn't even get a bid. Grandma leaned over and whispered, "Watch." She bought the desk for $75. Everyone laughed. Even I laughed. The thing looked ancient. When we got back to her house, she opened a hidden compartment I'd never noticed. Inside were documents dating back almost 100 years. A month later, she sold that desk to a collector for over $4,000. My jaw nearly hit the floor. She smiled and said, "People pay for stories, not objects." That sentence changed my life. Instead of buying expensive things, I started spending every weekend going to estate sales, garage sales, and auctions. My friends thought I'd completely lost it. Every Saturday morning while they were posting brunch photos online, I was digging through dusty garages looking at things nobody wanted. One friend called me a professional hoarder. Another asked if I was preparing for the apocalypse. My parents weren't much better. My dad walked into my apartment one day, looked around at all the old furniture and boxes, and asked, "Are you secretly living in a thrift store?" Honestly, there were moments when I questioned myself too. My apartment looked ridiculous. Instead of trendy decor, I had stacks of old books, antique lamps, vintage signs, and furniture in various stages of restoration. But then the money started coming, slowly at first. A vintage sign I bought for $40 sold for $900. An old camera purchased for $20 sold for nearly $700. A painting everyone assumed was worthless turned out to be from a regional artist with a cult following. That one sold for almost $6,000. Suddenly, I wasn't just making extra money. I was making more from my weekend hobby than from my full-time job. That's when things got interesting. The same friends who laughed at me started asking questions. "How did you know that was valuable? Can you teach me how to do this? What should I buy?" But by then, I had already spent years learning things they didn't. I knew how to spot original hardware. I knew which signatures mattered. I knew what collectors were hunting for before collectors knew they wanted it. Then came the moment that changed everything. At a small estate sale, I found a dusty box marked $100. Inside were dozens of old baseball cards. Most people ignored them because they looked damaged. Even the seller said they were probably worthless. But something caught my eye. I bought the entire box. When I got home, I spent hours researching every card. Then I found it. One card, just one. My hands were shaking. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. After authentication and auction fees, that single card sold for more money than I had earned during my first 3 years working corporate, over 6 figures. I remember staring at my bank account in complete disbelief. Meanwhile, several of my friends were drowning in credit card debt, trying to maintain lifestyles they couldn't actually afford. One had a luxury car she couldn't make payments on. Another was financing vacations. A third was renting designer handbags. Everything they owned was losing value. Everything I owned was gaining it. A year later, I quit my corporate job. 3 years later, I opened my own business. Today, I help collectors locate rare items all over the country. I've bought and sold things from celebrity estates, private collections, and museums. And every time someone asks how I got started, I think back to my grandmother. Because everyone focused on what things looked like. She focused on what they were becoming. Last year, one of the friends who used to mock me came to visit my warehouse. She looked around at shelves full of collectibles worth millions and asked, "So what was the secret?" I laughed because there wasn't one. I simply followed the advice everyone thought was stupid. I stopped buying things to impress people and started buying things people would someday wish they owned.